Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Jackie Simmons. Hey, Jackie.
Hello, I thought I had a chance to take a sip of coffee. There we go. Now I'm dead.
Oh, yes, it is early in the morning for us, so that's okay. Good time to have coffee. But just so people know you, I'm going to go ahead and just read your short bio. So, as a stress management consultant, Jackie Simmons has positively impacted over 120,000 people. As a business consultant, she's improved the bottom line of over 200 businesses. Along with her daughters, in 2020, Jackie co founded a nonprofit focused on improving mental well being, increasing positivity, and ending teen suicide. She's an 8-time international #1 best-selling author, and her TEDx talk has had over 93,000 views. Recently, Jackie was recognized as the third annual Global Forum of the Gulf Coast Latin Chamber of Commerce as an inspiring woman who builds. All right, so you've done a lot in your short life. So why don't you start out, just tell us your story, how this all started?
How this all started. How this all started goes into the Wayback Machine, back into the 90s. And it wasn't into my childhood, but into the childhood of my daughters. I have three daughters, and I'm an interesting combination because I was a single mom who was raised by a single mom. If you go further back into my childhood, I was raised in small towns in North Carolina, and my mother was divorced. That made me on the wrong side of the tracks by definition. I think she was the only divorced woman in the entire town. So I was different, and I didn't know how different. And for anyone out there who's ever felt different, take hope. Hope is what it is all about, and hope is an acronym. It stands for happiness, optimism, prosperity, and enthusiasm. And those are the four pillars that will balance you out, especially if you feel like you're just a little different and maybe not quite the norm. In our family, we say normal is a setting on the dishwasher. Yeah, it has no bearing on reality. So I was different. And so were my kids. And being a single mom was a challenge. Um, it wasn't in the plan. Okay, I had signed up for there was a great little book, and it described the Great American Escape Plan for women, which was you get married, you have kids, you're set for life. But that's not how the story usually goes. And it didn't go that way for me. So I had a 5 year old, a 3 year old, and a 1 year old. And I got to the end of the month and I could pay daycare or I could pay the rent. I couldn't pay both. So I got lucky, and a friend said, "Hey, Jackie, why don't you look at what I'm doing?" She had a licensed family daycare, and I fast tracked through the licensing and became an accidental entrepreneur. I knew nothing. I absolutely, Kimberly, I knew nothing about business. I just knew I had kids to feed and a roof to keep over their head. So I walked my 5 year old, everybody in the strollers, et cetera, down to the bus stop every morning so she could go to kindergarten and told all the other parents at the bus stop, "Hey, I've got my license as a daycare. I have openings for these age groups. Who do you know? If you know someone who has kids, let them know. I'm right here. I live right off the bus stop." I didn't know that was called networking or asking for referrals. Yeah. I accidentally became successful because I was persistent, not because I was so smart. And that was where I got smarter. But let me tell you what, if you've been around kids for a long period of time, you might relate to this. Kimberly, I reached a point where I could name all seven dwarfs, and I had no clue who was in office. So it was time for me to get out and play with the grown-ups. And so that's what I did. And I learned about networking and I learned about being an entrepreneur because by then I realized I had a skill set. And the skill set was helping people navigate that particular kind of business, helping them negotiate with their homeowners associations if somebody gave them a challenge about having a business in the neighborhood, helping them navigate between the state agencies that were influential in that business. And I thought if I could just get paid to do that, that's what I would do. Fast forward, and you have Jackie with chronic back pain. They put me on Levsin with phenobarb. Raising kids, trying to manage that was a nightmare. And so I started studying what would help me. And I realized I had more than just back pain. I had a chronic heart pain. I had a chronic broken heart. It showed up as clinical depression. And so the search began. I studied whatever they would give me to read. I read lots and lots of books. Some people have self help bookshelves. I had self help bookcases because I wanted to solve this puzzle. I'm in Western medicine, counseling, therapy, medication, really good stuff got me stable, but didn't offer me a cure. And I did not want a maintained life. So then I studied Eastern healing arts. I'm a multi certified expert, several different healing arts. And they had really good stuff, trading counseling, therapy, and medication for mindfulness, energy, and meditation. Really good stuff, and still no cure. Even though it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, they don't talk in terms of a permanent cure for something.
Mhm.
And I was like, ah. So I had the body, I had the spirit, I studied the mind. I studied mediation. I'm actually a mediator by training. And instead of doing court ordered mediation, I started mediating the conversation happening behind my eyes and between my ears. And that's what I do the most of. And boy, I was happy and I was stable. I was medication free. I was talk therapy free. I was depression free. I was stable like a three-legged elephant
Mhm.
as long as I was holding still. The minute I tried something new, it was a really herky jerky ride. And I couldn't figure out what was missing for quite a while. And then I realized it was body, mind, spirit, and emotions. What was missing was any education on emotions. So I joined the Society of Emotional Intelligence, met some really smart people, people with more letters after their name than I have in mine. And I studied something unique called somatic intuitive training. So one of my certifications is in that. And I pestered the man to take it into the marketplace. And the creator was over 80, writing a book, told me to just do what I wanted with it. And so I did. And there's a moment when I realized that all the work I had done, creating a transformation, something that would actually transform trauma, starting in the very first session without the need for anybody to talk about it, it was exactly what I had been looking for, was facing the wrong direction. And I didn't understand it until just the last few years. And so the journey is, for me, hopefully something that people will find something in it to relate to because it wasn't a planned life. It was being open to what can make this moment better. And so if nobody, here's the first thing to take away from this. Ask yourself a better question. It is the questions we ask. Would you agree? It's the questions we ask that determine the value that we bring to the world and the value we feel in our own lives. So, what would make this one moment just a little better? That's the first question to ask yourself. And so, I have lots of questions for people today.
That's a really, really good one. What would make this moment just a little bit better? I have a similar question that I ask myself, and it's what would I like right now? And it's
Oh,
just a simple question. It's not really would I like a new house? It's like, would I like to just sit down and take a breath? Would I, am I hungry? Am I feeling sad? Do I want to call my mom? What what do I want right now? Because staying in the present and being present with yourself is so important.
It's a true gift that we give to ourselves. And it's interesting. Once we can be present with ourselves, even for just a minute, then we can be present. Pardon me. Thank you. All right. Then we can be more present for other people. And they notice. They notice. I realize that there's a basic human need that is often gone unmet, and that's the need to feel heard. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone who you could tell they were so busy thinking about what they were going to say next that they really weren't hearing what you were saying? The cure for that is to be present, Kimberly.
Yes,
Get
exactly.
curious.
Really hear people. And I have a friend that does something called active listening. And that's when you really are listening to the person and then you think about it and then you respond. So, and I tend to do that naturally because you notice how slowly I speak. So I'm a slow speaker, and some people think, why does it take her so long to respond? Well, it's because I've actually been trained that way, because I was in the therapy space, and sometimes I would ask the patient, and I worked with a lot of children, I would ask the patient a question, and so many adults, if the kid doesn't say something, they just rush on or ask the parents. But I would be known to wait a whole minute, just waiting there, looking at them, not insistent, but just waiting for them to see what they're going to say. And sometimes you do have to wait a minute with certain people to hear what they're going to say or prompt them to let them know that you really do want to hear what they're about to say or what they want to say.
That ability to stay present, to stay curious, to wonder, I wonder how they're going to answer this is a true gift. And you hit upon something using the word active. We were often taught to be passive, especially in school,
Mhm.
to sit and behave and be quiet and be what they wanted us to be. And it worked for crowd control, but not for curiosity. And it is curiosity that kept my daughter alive. See, there's yeah, it's like which way do we all want to take this story? Because I speak a lot with entrepreneurs and business owners, and I speak a lot with health and wellness professionals and environments, employee health fairs. And that was the last talk I gave was on how do you quiet your mind in 3 minutes or less. And the day before that, I spoke with my middle daughter. We co-presented on how to have the talk that saves lives. It's the positive side of suicide prevention, which freaks people's brains out a little bit. And I did, that's usually a good thing, by the way. If something interrupts your normal way of thinking about something, that's a good thing because it means you're ready to build a new neural pathway. So there's a positive side of suicide prevention. As a matter of fact, positivity is pure suicide prevention, not toxic positivity where you are ignoring reality, but the ability to ask the question, what would make this moment a little bit better? The ability to ask a question of someone and be present and curious. It's a requirement for the talk that saves lives. And because most people don't have training like you have had in active listening or any kind of listening, we actually wrote the guide that says exactly what to do and why. Because if you don't have the training and you want to be able to help improve the positivity of the people around you and improve the positivity of the planet, which is my goal in life, is to improve the positivity of the planet, it helps to have a guide. And so that's one of the free resources on the website, the suicidepreventionsociety.com, is that ability to have that talk, to read the guide, to have written responses. So no matter what the other person says, it sort of creates a safe container for a conversation on a topic that most people don't know how to talk about. And the one thing I've learned, okay, three things I've learned on this topic. The first one, when it comes to suicide, silence is not golden. Silence is deadly. The second thing we've learned is you can't tell by looking. You can't tell by looking who's struggling or who's grieving. And once COVID hit, this became incredibly true and easy for me to figure out because every time I was on a Zoom call, as soon as I was introduced or somebody asked me what I do, and I'm the director of the Suicide Prevention Society, so if I introduced myself that way, the private chats would start. And I would be asked or I would be thanked for the work I'm doing, and that someone would start to tell me their story. In every room I walk into, whether it's in person or on Zoom, there is at least one person grieving the loss of someone they love to suicide. And there's at least one person struggling to stay alive. And I know because they tell me. And I didn't want that job. I want the job of how do I prevent them from ever being in that position? I want the job of helping no family ever say the words, we didn't see it coming. Because it's true. And I'm going to give all the parents, all of the friends, a get out of guilt free card. May I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Even if there are signs, your brain is hardwired not to acknowledge them. It's called the reticular activating system, the RAS. And every single one of us is hardwired to believe my kid's okay. My friend's fine. We are hardwired to believe they're okay. What does that mean? That your brain is going to automatically only allow in those signs and symptoms and signals that match your belief system, that match your BS. And once I understood that, then I was a little happier because my middle daughter was suicidal. And there's a document over, if you go hunting for it, on the Center for Disease Control's website that talks about the warning signs of suicide. And it's the most guilt producing document in the world because nobody goes looking for that until after somebody has attempted, until they know somebody's in trouble. And all the prevention programs in the world that we could find have one criteria. You got to be qualified for it. How are you qualified? You have a mental health diagnosis, you're labeled at risk, or you have a previous attempt. Wait a minute. This is broken and backwards. It's not looking at what the problem is, it's only managing the symptoms, which is kind of the mechanical medical model that everything is mental health and physical health together. So we went the other direction. And we said, okay, how do we break the silence? How do we get people talking? How do we make it possible for people to share what's going on without triggering a need to report in a need to report state?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you said is, one of the signs is that they have a previous attempt. And the thing is, if someone really is intentional in not being here, there's not a first and attempt. There's just an attempt, and it's not an attempt. It happens.
Well,
It's just
okay, that's something that I heard a lot of. That if someone has lethal intent, they're going to die. There's no such thing as a survivor of a lethal attempt. That's not true, though. Kids wake up, adults wake up in emergency rooms and say, I have no idea what happened. And this confuses doctors and people in the mental health profession. And that's how we ended up with what we were talking about before we went on air. This is what we figured out. If somebody has a thought, Okay, a thought of suicide, by the way, is a naturally occurring thought. According to Freud, suicidal thinking is just part of our worst case scenario problem solving mechanism in the brain. No problem. But if you have a thought that's uncomfortable and you don't want to tell anyone about it, now you start having emotion around it. And then what do? My daughter said she didn't want to tell me because she didn't want to worry me. Go figure. So, anyway, so she has the thought. We'll use her as an example. And she doesn't want to talk about it. She's scared of talking about it. Now she's got emotion around it. So, what does she try to do? Not think about it. If I said, don't think about an elephant, don't think about a pink pachyderm. Okay. Did anybody just have an elephant prancing around in their head? Because that's what happens when your brain doesn't understand the word don't or not or negative. So you try not to think about a thought. Now you're thinking about not thinking about the thought. It's called doubling down on it, and it can become a negative echo chamber. And your brain is elegantly designed to bring about what you think about, to create plans and to look for opportunities for what you are focused on. And if you are focused on suicide, it's going to work the same way. This is the law of attraction in action. So now you've got your subconscious mind looking for opportunities, creating plans. You've got your conscious mind going, I'm not thinking about that. I'm not thinking about that. Scarlett O'Hara, I'll think about it tomorrow. Yeah. And all it takes is for a subconscious plan to cross an opportunity, and kids are jumping off bridges. And they don't have a conscious thought about doing it. It's the subconscious driver. And they wake up in the emergency rooms and go, I don't know what happened. And they're telling the truth. Kids, especially, have this because they have less impulse control. That part of the brain that's not fully developed, the aftermarket part that is supposed to be there, the prefrontal, it's in the piece of the brain escapes me at the moment, but it develops very slowly. And it's physically there by the age of 12, completely built out supposedly by the age of 24. And it's the part that allows for really good decision making. And it's just not there. And so, yeah, lethal attempt is lethal attempt. A lot of them survive and some don't. The number of kids who attempt 3,000 a day, teenagers in America, 3,000 a day. And that was before COVID, and those are just the ones we know about. And that startling statistic was shared publicly by my daughter when she gave a 7-minute message that matters. This is the day that my purpose tapped me on my shoulder because I teach speaking. And part of this event was everybody delivered a 7-minute talk. An audience was there. She looked amazing, and she was the first speaker. Her hair was put up, sort of like this. Her hair was put up. And she had on a dark flowery blouse and a light colored skirt. And she started her talk after she walked up and confidently shook my hand with that statistic, 3,000 a day. And I was shocked. I'm in the back of the room, and I didn't know suicide was going to be her topic. And I didn't know that statistic. It just floored me. She went on to say, when I was 14, and she began publicly sharing about what we had lived through together, but had not shared publicly, not really talked about. As long as she was getting professional help, I had convinced myself we didn't need to talk about it. I absolutely believed that I could put the thought back in her head, and I wasn't willing to risk that. That day, as she shared, 30 years of stress management training is the only thing that kept me from crawling into a corner and crying. And when she was done, her final thoughts were that she had massed a lot of skills along her suicide avoidant journey, and that she wanted to get those skills into the hands of teenagers before they need them. And it was those 4 words that launched the movement of peer prevention programs. Before they need them. And
Yeah,
that's
so
how.
I'm just curious because you started out by telling your story that you actually went into depression, and so you were having trouble yourself. So I'm just wondering on the timeline, where did this come in where your daughter started um experiencing these issues with wanting to commit suicide? Was it at the same time that you were dealing with your own depression?
There's not a direct correlation between the two. And when someone dies by suicide, and I'm just, words are my thing. So I'm going to answer your question. But first, I just want to mention something to everyone listening. Suicide is no longer a crime. It used to be considered a crime against the village, and that's why we committed suicide. The wording had to change because it's no longer considered a crime. It's actually considered to be an illness, just like you die from diabetes or someone dies from cancer, people die from suicide. And so it's a more neutral language, and that's easier on families because it's hard on families when they've lost someone to suicide to hear someone say that they committed a crime.
Mm.
What they did was die. And we're all going to do that at some point. So dialing that down just a little bit. My first bout of clinical depression was way before my daughter was a teenager. She was still really, really little. And it was, oh, she might have been 3, 4, 5 in that area, early childhood for her. And then again, when she was in high school, and so her attempt was her first attempt, and I have to say it that way, was in the middle. It was when she was in the middle between middle school and high school, was that summer, in the summer of 1995, to be precise. Some dates stick in my head. Yeah, she
So
was, oh,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
wondering because I know there's other parents probably asking this or thinking this. So, before that attempt, did you have any indication something was brewing or something was in her head? Because she said she
Okay,
didn't
this is the
hurry
most
you.
guilt producing question you can ask a parent of a suicidal child, except for someone who understands it. I understand parents are looking for signs. By the way, on the website is a suicide risk assessment. So we've actually created a tool to help people answer this question. And I will be really, really, really blunt. My daughter was in therapy before she had an attempt. Did we know something was wrong? Yes. Did we feel that we were failed by the medical model? Yes, because she was getting help
Mhm.
and she tried to take her own life. She spent years and years in counseling and therapy, both before and after, especially after. And here's where I created the idea because it was my own experience, but more importantly, it was my daughter's. Every time she changed doctors, every time she changed therapists, every time she changed counselors, she went backwards. Why? Because they all needed her history. They all needed her to tell her story over and over. Every time she told the story, what did she do? She reactivated that neural network in her brain. It made everything worse. So I say talk therapy and I are not on speaking terms. So
That
it
makes
just it did
total
not
sense to me because you're just focused, being from the vision area, focusing on what you don't want is going to give you more of what you don't want. And
exactly.
that's what
And,
happens when you have to tell your story over and over and over and over again, as
mhm,
opposed to what I do when I work with people is I look for patterns. I don't care about the details. I'm looking
mhm.
for a pattern and then we just shift the pattern. And so for your daughter to have to go through that and other people's daughters and sons or themselves going through that where they're asked to tell their story and to feel that over and over again and just enforcing it in their mind, that makes total sense to me.
Would you like something that works better?
Yes.
Would it be okay if we demonstrated it?
Yes.
Okay, this is the talk that saves lives. Here's the invitation. Hey, Kimberly, I've decided to be part of the mission to end suicide. Kimberly, they gave me a guide. I need to practice. Would you have a few minutes to help me practice my guide?
Oh, yes.
Awesome. Awesome. There's only four questions, and there's one rule, which is for the first three questions, you can only answer yes or no. And then on the fourth question, you can tell me as much as you want. That okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to read it so that I don't miss anything. Okay. All right, so here's question one. Have you heard about the rise in suicides?
No.
Thank you. Question two. Do you have a story? Do you have a friend who's tried or died?
Yes.
Thank you. Kimberly, question three. Have you ever thought of leaving that way?
Yes.
Thank you. Question four. Kimberly, why stay? What are your reasons for staying?
People who love me.
Tell me more.
Well, when someone leaves that way, it hurts everyone around them.
So, why stay? What's so good about your life that you want more of it?
Mm, there's lots of things that are good as opposed to negative.
So, list one of the things that's good, that's so good in your life that you want more of it.
Just being with around the people that I love.
Cool, 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 cool. So, thank you. And thank you for staying. The world needs more of you who stay and are willing to stay. What just happened in your brain? Here's what happened. The global question activates the angst, any angst you have about the topic of suicide. The second question brings it into your sphere of influence. Do you have a friend?
Hmm.
The third question brings it home, makes it personal. Now you've activated that whole neural network without aggravating it, just activated it. And so you've got all that electricity there. And then with the fourth question, with one fell swoop, we stole all of that electricity and redirected it into a brand new neural pathway labeled reasons for staying. And the more you help someone stay in that reasons for staying conversation, the faster they build out a new neural network in their brain. And then when a thought of leaving, neutral language, when a thought of leaving crosses their mind, it hits this new filter in the reticular activating system labeled reasons for staying. And the thought doesn't stay around. So we prevent that whole negative echo chamber from forming by simply reading this guide with someone else. And there's a disclaimer on the guide that says if you are talking to someone and they say yes to question three, yes, they have had thoughts of leaving that way. And they say no to question four, they have zero reasons for staying. Stay with them and call 911. They may hate you for it, and you may save their life.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think the percentage is? Thousands of talks. What's the percentage? What's the number of times that someone said yes to question three, they've had thoughts of leaving, and no to question four, they have zero reasons for staying?
And it's hard to believe that people couldn't think of one thing they're thankful for, because that's how I think of it, something that you're thankful for. So, I mean, even if it's I have a nice house to live in, or, I have a friend, or,
Well,
any little thing.
you hit upon something really, really key. One is that someone who's facing positivity most of the time, facing in a positive direction, cannot imagine their brain ever not having an answer. And there are people whose brains don't have an answer. If they're dealing with depression, if they are struggling with suicidal ideation, they may not have an answer. But what's really interesting is the number of times that someone said yes to question three and no to question four is zero. Why? Two reasons. One, our brain is hardwired to answer questions. That's why questions we ask are so important because our brain is the ultimate search engine. It's going to go find an answer. So we want to make sure we're asking really good questions.
Mhm.
The other is that somebody who's struggling, like my daughter was, and who doesn't want to worry the people around her, is going to lie. They're going to make up reasons for staying. And what's really the miracle is it doesn't matter. If they make up a reason for staying, their brain is still hearing the one voice it cannot argue with. Your subconscious mind cannot argue with your own voice saying they have reasons for staying. So they're still building out a brand new neural pathway labeled reasons for staying. It is super cool. Now, here's the caveat on this. How do you test something like this? Well, if you've got kids or if you are a kid and my mom used me as the guinea pig. She was in education. Every time a new test came out that she had to use with her elementary school classes, I got tested first. I was the guinea pig. So what did I do with my oldest daughter when I was creating new things? She was my guinea pig. I was actually sitting in her basement when I created the talk that saves lives, the first rough draft of it. So of course I'm testing it with her. Now, she was in her 30s, yeah, late 30s, maybe early 40s at the time. But she's still my snarky teenager mentality kid. So when we got to question 4, her first response for why stay? I haven't seen a unicorn yet. Cool. So I just went on, why else? I knew she was just, trying to get my goat. I let my goat be got. Um, and a couple of years later, her husband got a throat infection, was hospitalized, and they thought he was going to die. And she went through a really dark time, and she was having really dark thoughts, and she was home alone. And then, and I didn't know this would happen. I didn't know this happened until I heard my daughter Katie, my oldest, be interviewed on a podcast. And she was sharing this story. And she said she was home alone. She was not in a good place at all at the point of acting on her dark thoughts when she thought, I still haven't seen a unicorn yet.
Uh-huh.
And so she was sharing publicly on the podcast that it worked for her. That thought that she had created in all of her snarkiness as a smartass actually broke open her negative echo chamber.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, well, there we go. Cool. Who knew that I could save my own daughter's life by being brave enough to ask her questions that I was just trying to work out? There's something really special about being willing to have this talk with people. Oh, and you know what I said about how the electricity in your brain got activated and then redirected, and then we just did that. We just suicide proofed everyone listening to this podcast
That's awesome.
because of something called mirror neurons. Everybody's brain was playing along with yours. And so when you were going reasons for staying and you were coming up with yours, everybody's brain was coming up with their own if they're listening to this podcast, which is what is so fun about my TEDx talk is the fact that 93,000 people have had their brains rewired because this talk is embedded in that talk.
Mm-hmm.
My mission in the world is to have people understand that if you're willing to ask people to help you with the guide, just to help you practice, you've already started them on the journey to positivity. Because there's a little 3-year-old in all of us. Remember when kids were 3 or when you were 3 and your mom said, would you like to help me with this? Goody, I get to help. What can I do? That little kid still exists in all of us. We love to be asked to help people. We absolutely love it. So the minute you ask someone to help you practice the guide, you're activating that inner 3-year-old. You're pumping their blood with positive emotional chemicals, the counterbalancing to the stress chemicals. And I became a stress management consultant because I needed all the help I could get. Yeah, I was a single mom when they were little. Then I remarried. Life was stable for a while. And then I was a single mom again. During that instability, I realized that my own mental state was my job.
Mm.
I could not outsource it to anyone. If I wanted to be what I call being healthily self centered, if I wanted to be in the center of my life, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Kimberly, where you walk into a room and you know the emotional state of everyone in the room except one person, yourself. I was totally invisible to myself. And one day I woke up and realized that if I kept living my life the way I was living my life, I was going to get to the end of my life never having lived my life because I was in survival mode all the time, noticing what other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations were, and letting those define my life until the day I woke up. And everything changed in a very short period of time.
I mean, that
Thank God.
makes sense too. I was just talking to someone about that, and she was saying, she's actually recently going through a divorce, and she's in the middle of moving and even changing jobs and everything. And she said, as women, we make sure everyone else is taken care of. We don't even consider ourselves. We're just always taking care of others. And then all of a sudden, when we don't have to anymore, we don't know even who we are, what we're supposed to be doing.
I was living alone for the first time in my life. And I had just bought my house on my own. Celebrate! And I had renovated this bathroom in this little loft area that was upstairs. So it had this little upstairs area, and the house is quiet. I was in Maryland, and it was really peaceful and had this open stairway up there. And so I had put in a big bathtub up there, and I filled it up, and I got in it, and it was so warm. And then I grabbed the sides of the tub because there was an earthquake. Now, Maryland doesn't get a lot of earthquakes, but it has had one. So that it's shaking. And then I realized it wasn't an earthquake. Oh my God, it was the renovation. The tub was going to fall into the kitchen.
Oh,
And I'm like, holy crap. So I slithered out of the tub, grabbed a towel, got across the floor, and inched my way down the stairs and sat on the bottom steps and realized it wasn't the tub that was shaking. It was me. I
oh,
was having an anxiety attack. I'd never had one before. I didn't even know what it was until later. But you talk about women who are focused so much on other people's needs and other people's expectations, and exactly what I was describing. Here I was alone with no one to push my emotional buttons, and my emotional system spasmed
mm,
because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what to do. There was nobody, nothing to react to, nothing to respond to, even. It was quiet. And so I understand what your friend is going through. What other people see as the chaos of moving and changing jobs and all of those things happening at once is actually probably going to save her life. It's the entrepreneurial enigma that most people don't know. Small business owners, when they sell their companies or retire, the first 6 months after they retire, they are in one of the highest risk groups for a heart attack because their body is suddenly deprived of all of the adrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, all of the stress chemicals that they were living on. Well, the same was true for me. So mine showed up as an anxiety attack, not a heart attack, thank goodness. But it was the only one I've ever had. And it sent me further on this mission to figure out how the brain really works. And that's my mission in life, is to help people understand that Your brain is elegantly designed to receive guidance from you. The big challenge is most of us have not been trained in the instruction manual for the brain. So we think our conscious mind, our thinking brain, is in charge. This is the ant, really good little book called The Ant and the Elephant, because in the psychology world, the subconscious mind is the elephant in the room. This is our logo. Subconscious mind is the elephant, conscious mind is an ant. Even if you put a human on top of an elephant and you go galloping down the road and the human wants to go this way, you think the elephant's going to pay attention? Not even going to notice. This is how most people live their lives as they're riding an elephant. My elephant's name was Joe, Joe. Other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations. So to get down off of Joe, to retrain Joe, has been my mission now. And I have a course on limiting beliefs. It's a 10-minute course on how to change a limiting belief in 10 minutes or less, because we just weren't given the guides. So that's what I've been creating and testing with my kids first, and then with the work with my clients. But they're coming out as a series of rack cards that people can pick up and use the tools of how to make peace with their past, or how to adjust their attitude, or how to change a limiting belief. We need guideposts, and it's fun. If someone wants to be in the center of their own life and somebody else says they're selfish, I have a definition of selfish for them. When someone accuses you of being selfish, what they are really saying is, how dare you pay attention to what you want when you should be, notice that word, you should be paying attention to what I want you to do. Who's selfish? Mm-hmm. So when someone says you're selfish, say, yeah, and it feels good. That's my response. When someone says you make me feel so mad, I now have a response for that. Oh, do you know where that phrase is used the most? In the grocery store. Uh-huh. If you've ever walked in a grocery store and you're just shopping, you're looking at things on the shelf, and then you hear a couple of aisles over, there's an adult and a kid starting to sort of get into it about something. And then you hear the words, the adult, you make me so mad. In that moment, the adult just handed the kid an emotional remote control. Kid doesn't know any better. He accepts it. And in that second, the kid became responsible for the emotional state and stability of the adult. What about that makes sense? And then the kid collects emotional remote controls from other people, because that's what you do, and you give them away to other people. And our music even supports this. You make me feel like a natural woman. Oh, no, he didn't. But that's the music. The music gives emotional control away. Mm-hmm. My attitude about that song is, no, he did not make you feel like a natural woman. You felt like a little action, and so you gave him credit so you could have what you wanted. We know how this game is played. The fun side of all of this is that once you understand about emotional remote controls, that other people have been trained to push your buttons and get a response. And when you start changing, the first message you're likely to get from your family, and I want everybody to be prepared for this because it will blindside you if you're not. Everyone who says, go for it, go to college, go grow, do your thing, go, 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 go. And then the minute you do, they send you the message that says, change back. Because you're no longer responding to them in the way they were used to. Mm-hmm. I went to college in my 40s. I wasn't even halfway through, and my husband at the time said he didn't like who I was becoming. And what I realized is that by developing myself, by focusing on my own education, by getting my brain activated and engaged in the world, I wasn't becoming someone else. I was finally, for the first time, letting him see who I really was. I had gotten down off of Joe. I wasn't responding to his judgments, opinions, and expectations. And while he had supported me in going to school and even helped pick the degree, which is one of the reasons I am a college dropout, um, he wasn't prepared for the effect it would have on my personal development, and that I might stop or start. Yeah, I might stop being passive and start being more expressive of what I thought about things. It was not a dynamic that played well. His messages to me were changed back. Well, once the brain is expanded, like you can't, once you stretch it, it doesn't go back to the way it was. You can't put. They found the genie in the bottle after World War II when they said, "Okay, women, now go back to the kitchens because we don't need you in the factories." Did not work well.
Nope.
No matter how many Ozzie and Harriet and Father Knows Best and Donna Reed shows they put on the mind control device known as a television, the reality was that we had changed and the dynamics in relationships had changed. The 60s were not an aberrant decade, the 50s were. It was an absolute mind control attempt. Oh, and by the way, the television, the original patent, is owned by the United States government as a mind control device.
Interesting.
What we allow to enter our eyes and enter our ears is more important, in my opinion, than what we put in our mouths to eat. What really affects our health is not a mystery. We know if we move around, if we maintain adequate nutrition, if we maintain adequate hydration, that our physiology, our physicalness, our physiology, there we go, our physiology is going to work just fine, with the exception of what we're feeding our minds, because the brain is the basis for regulating everything. So when I get a chance and teach the story of stress, I can show how the caveman responded to stress and how we haven't changed a bit. Our bodies are still hardwired to do exactly what his body did with our common ancestor, the caveman Og. So Og is a really interesting guy. Did you know we're related? That we have a common ancestor?
No.
Oh yeah, we're all descended from Og and not his friend Larry. And here's why. Og got up one morning, he's a caveman, got up, had some meat, walks out of his cave, sees a shaking bush, jumps back in his cave. If we could freeze frame, we'd see that in that instant, the blood flowed to his arms and legs for his big muscles, and he was ready to fight or flee. This is the stress reaction. Once he got back in his cave, what did he do? Took a deep breath, shook it off. When he took a deep breath, he activated sensors in the base of his lungs that still exist in our lungs that told his body he was safe. So his body produced the counterbalancing chemicals to the stress cocktail, and he went back to being just calm and relaxed and figured he'd go outside later. Now, that reaction saved his life. It's a survival skill. See, he didn't have to think about the bush at all. Why? Because he had very little memory space. So all he could think about is what's wrong with this picture. That's all the memory storage he had. So what's wrong with the shaking bush? He didn't have to think about it. Why? Because his friend Larry had gotten too close to a shaking bush and got eaten by the tiger that was hiding inside it. Curiosity was not the caveman's friend. Later, curiosity now is our friend because we can become curious about how do we tame this fight or flight. Because while we don't have real dinosaurs, I had a boss that would come and stand behind my chair, and I didn't understand what would happen. He'd ask me a question and I could barely get a word out, and you couldn't remember anything. It's because I didn't understand Og, the Og brain that I had inherited. Because when Og was ready to fight or flee and all that blood is in his muscles, guess where it came from? The higher functioning areas of his brain. Why? because he didn't need to be analyzing, he needed to be acting. And also, it prevented him from bleeding to death if he got a head injury, which was kind of common when you're a caveman. But two other things happened in his body. Kimberly, if you're going to fight for your life, what percentage of your resources do you want available?
100%.
Same is true for Og. So, what happened in his body? Systems started shutting down. The first system that shut down was his own body's healing. Why? Because he didn't need to direct any energy to healing the scratch he got in the brush yesterday when he's trying to avoid becoming lacerated today. So the natural healing shut down. The other system that shut down was digestion. Why? Well, he didn't need to have any resources going to digest his breakfast when he was trying to avoid becoming lunch for somebody else. Think about it today. Here's my boss. What happened? Blood drained out of my head, no functioning in the higher function, memory, reasoning, language. Digestion shut down, healing shut down. My boss would leave after I mumbled, like, I'll get back to you. What did I do? What I wasn't doing when he was standing there. I started taking a deep breath. And then what happened? My brain came back online. That's what he needed. And I'd have to chase him down the hallway using my big muscles, which is how the system is designed. When you think about the scourges of our age, think about riding into work and somebody cuts you off in traffic. Not a big deal, but it pumps up a little bit of that stress chemical in your body because you're trying to avoid bumping into them or you get angry at them. If you don't know how the system works, if you don't take 3 deep breaths, if you don't have a chance to use your big muscles, those chemicals take 24 hours to naturally degrade. But what happens? How many of us go 24 hours without another challenge that triggers more stress chemicals in the body? Well, now you're adding on top. And so we're constantly having our immune system interrupted. Our ability to heal is constantly interrupted by the stressors of the day. Our ability to digest food, constantly interrupted by the stressors of the day. So now what do we have? Obesity, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, something that only came about in the last couple of decades called adrenal failure. People talk about blowing out their adrenals. What do they mean? They've been so stressed for so long and they didn't know how to manage the stress that their body systems can't keep up with the demand for adrenaline. These are the scourges of the age, and they all have one thing in common. And most doctor's appointments do. 94% of all primary care office visits are for stress related disorders. Stress is the challenge for all of us. And so, focusing on the positive, the tools that you have created are just amazing for visualization, helping people see themselves as beacons of hope, happiness, optimism, prosperity, and enthusiasm. That's the cure for almost all of the diseases and issues of the day, is for people to get in the center of their own life to make their happiness matter first. I'm on this. You can tell this is my stump. You know,
Awesome. Well, I know people would like to find you, find your resources. So where can they find you?
they can find me at my name, JackieSimmons.com. And there they can find some resources and they can also find a way to connect with me.
All right, wonderful. So now I have a personal question for you. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
It's backwards from what most people would think. My middle daughter recently moved back home, and it's because of her health. She has multiple chronic health conditions. And that sense of being a full time mom again, as much as I want her to heal, I realized that there's something very special in knowing that you make a difference on a daily basis. And so I invite everybody to find somebody that you can make a difference for today in a positive way, because that's what moves me. Helping her fulfill her mission. The end of suicide, the suicide prevention movement is her mission in the world. And helping find speaking gigs for her, helping her have the resources out there. There was even a song written for us for this mission. So helping the people find those resources. So the website I really want people to go to is the suicide prevention society.com. That's where all the resources are. It's all open source. Nobody puts in a name or an email address. Everything is there for you. And please share it. You don't know whose life you're going to save because you can't tell by looking.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much because now people have the resources, which is amazing. And we all want to save lives and make sure our loved ones especially are okay and don't have that enemy thought process happening in the background. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly. It's been a real pleasure, and it is a joy to have met you and to see the wonderful things that you have created.
Thank you. So I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Live your life, however quirky you think it is. Be the best you can be. Who you are is amazing. What you do is important. And heaven doesn't need another angel. Heaven knows we need you here in all your quirkiness.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jackie. We'll talk to you again soon.